Welcome to Church Planting in a Pandemic, the story of Hope City, Florida. We're your co-hosts, Chandon Bangar and Eric Smith. Well, hey, welcome back to episode 4 of Church Planting in a Pandemic. In the last episode, we talked about several things, temporary spaces that we were in, kind of some of the financial side, some funding that we were blessed with to just kind of launch into the launch phase of our church. And so, lots of things to talk about. But just before we do that, maybe you're binge listening to some of these episodes or binge watching them. And I just want to encourage some of the pastors and leaders out there, like, you don't have to rely on a gift or, some generosity from somebody to get started to church plant. Like we didn't. Yeah, I hope you heard us right. Like it's the idea that we moved in faith, and then along the way somebody gave. Mm-hmm. And I know there's lots of stories out there, like maybe you were donated a building, or maybe you took over a church that was, maybe dying, or there's so many different things out there. Or maybe you're still in a high school gymnasium, and that's great too. Like God's still moving, God's still working. And I just want to encourage you, like if you're considering church planting, there's also a lot of networks, of church planting networks that you can get involved in, where you can learn, you can go sit under leadership for, a few short months, and then also gain some financial stability to go launch and kind of build a team. And so, I don't know, Eric he started his own church planting network, the 242 network. And so that's kind of how we launched into planning this church, because he had the ideas, the wisdom, the experience. And we just kind of were like, hey, let's just launch a church. Let's do this thing. And so I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Eric, but
Sure, yeah. So 242, that was a church planting network that we launched about a year after we started the church in Mississippi. So it's been going for a while. I'm no longer affiliated. I'm still close friends with everybody, but they focus in the state of Mississippi. But yeah, that was an amazing journey of getting to learn from so many people during that time of that network. And we had an amazing team of church planters across Mississippi, and they still do, that are leading that network. And it was an honor to be a part of that and get to be a part of starting that. And it was a lot of fun. I was talking to one of the guys from that network not long ago, just recapping and sharing a little bit about what we're going through and what's going on. But just like Chandon said, we were blessed with that unique gift and a lot of different other sacrificial gifts and so many other things. But then there are other church plants that they're able to take over a building from a church that has declined or and is about to close, or they're able to get into a high school that's a strategic location. God's going to make a way. When He calls you, He will part the seas. He will make a way. You just got to keep pressing in, and God's going to do it in a lot of different ways. But we were definitely incredibly blessed. But it was a lot of steps of faith that led to that, and a lot of roadblocks that we hit that were extremely discouraging before that breakthrough. So what I've discovered is, following the Lord and being obedient to His call, you're going to run into a lot of different roadblocks before you see the breakthrough.
Yeah.
If you think that you're just going to say yes and then the breakthroughs are all going to come easily, it's probably not going to happen. But one of the things that I will say in this journey that have been different than some of my past, and I mentioned this a little bit in an early episode, but just really learning to depend more on the Holy Spirit. I've had so many failures over the years of depending on myself too much and not depending on the Lord. And I slip back into that so easily. Yeah. But I'm trying, and I'm trying to get people who are keeping me accountable and mentoring me and helping me to stay dependent on the Lord and not dependent on myself, because when I become dependent on myself, my stress increases. And actually, the church's effectiveness decreases. Yeah. And so I just don't want to do that. But man, it's been amazing. There's so many incredible networks. There's so many people that you can find that'll help you in the world of church planting. It's changed a lot from when even I planted the first church 12, 13 years ago, of how much more there is available as far as training and resources. If you go online and look, there's so many, and I've learned from so many. I've learned from Acts 29. I've learned from the Sin Network. I've learned from Stadia,
churches.
Ark.
Yeah.
I mean, you name them. I've learned stuff from all of them, and I'm thankful for every one of them that are out there making a difference. And I didn't name all of them, but so many. And it's such a cool thing to see what the Lord's doing. And my prayer is that we see even more of that take place, and that we see churches willing to mobilize people and collectively work together to mobilize people to plant, so that when we send out planters, we're not just sending them out with a check and a thumbs up, but we're sending them out with a group of people that are going to help them so that their sustainability and success rate increases drastically. I just think we've got to re-envision, and we'll talk more about this in another episode, but I want to talk sometime in the future about re-envisioning church planting. I think we've got to re-envision, because what we're doing is not working all the time. We've definitely changed the game in that there's a lot more conversations about planting. There's resources. There's churches giving to it. But I think we can go to another level and work more strategically and do a lot more. So that's all stuff that we have a vision for our future and what we want to do, and we'll talk more about that later.
Yeah, I think something we can talk about now, Eric, is when we were in that second temporary space, when we were in that 4,000 square foot warehouse, if you will, we were strategizing. Now that we received that gift, we were planning on this building that we were going to have brought up and plan out and lay out and all this stuff. But we had to have our connectors, which is what we call our volunteers, kind of get in the back of their minds. We can't stay at this level. Like, we've got to scale to a much greater size. We've got to build the children's ministry to where, there's going to be several babies coming through the door, several families that are going to need to be taken care of. We're going to need to, be ready for a lot of people that are wanting to get connected and to receive Christ and to get baptized. So let's talk about the strategy that we were asking some of our volunteers, like the ask that we gave them to prepare for the launch time. And we were preparing to launch in October, I think the 26th, 27th? 24th, something like that. It's all a blur. But
it's been a while, right?
October 24th.
Well, I'll tell you, so kind of the analogy I used in the last episode about a baby, conception, first trimester, second trimester, third trimester. So a key component, in my opinion, and philosophy of church planting is in that second trimester, it's really important that you make sure and begin to build your volunteer base. We call them connectors, as Shannon mentioned, helping people connect to God and to each other. That's their ultimate role outside of their job description in which they serve. And so with those connectors, they go through our connection class, which in essence is our membership class. So we want to make sure that anybody that serves aligns with us and believes what we believe, because we're entrusting them to represent this body, this church. And then also they sign that covenant in their commitment in what they're doing. And so I believe in covenants. I believe in commitments. A covenant is a commitment. And so we have to challenge people in commitment. You see, commitment is a step toward maturity. And so if you're going to have a mature, strong church, even though it's a baby and even though it hasn't even been birthed yet, you've got to start with, because what you're doing is you're building a family to care for that birth of that church, for that birth of that baby. And so we spent a lot of time trying to help make sure to build those teams. We have some of the most amazing volunteers at this church that go above and beyond. We have stay-at-home moms that sacrifice greatly. We've got businessmen that serve like crazy. We've got physicians who give of their day off to organize and plan. I mean, we've got, name it, school teachers, everything you can imagine across the board, where people are just going above and beyond. And it's such an amazing thing because they're not doing it out of obligation. They're doing it out of an incredible commitment to the Lord and to His church to build something incredible. And I think that's why it's so life-giving to them as they step into that. So the challenge that you face in that second trimester as you're building that, and we were in that 4,000 square foot warehouse space during this time, right? So we're about 5 months, 4.5 months before our official launch. We're in that space. You had just gotten here, hit the ground. So we've gone from, video worship to live worship, which was a big step. But we're also building our kids' ministry. We're building our greeter teams. We're building our prayer and care team. We're building out some small groups. all these pieces that are essential for the health and thriving nature of the church, for us to be, living out the purposes of the church. As we're building that out, sometimes you do have to have people that stand in the gap and do things that aren't their best skill.
Right.
Obviously, the ultimate goal is to get people in their sweet spot, and you're getting to that point. But just like when you're about to have a baby, right? Sometimes you have to be uncomfortable before the birth. Well, that's the way it is with the church plant. There's discomfort, and so you're stretching your team, you're stretching them, and our people have been so amazing, and you're stretching yourself, right? You're doing things that are outside of your wheelhouse, and I've done that, you've done that, but it's during that season that's so critical. But what we saw during those months was just amazing, because when we stepped into that space and we were able to go from Saturday evening to a Sunday morning, a launch team gathering. So we went from that 60, 70, 80 people till we immediately jumped to almost 100, and then quickly went over 100, and then had to go to 2 services. And even going to 2 services that we did, I think it was the first weekend of August, it was a little scary. And I can remember some people looked at me like, "Are you crazy? Why are we going to 2 services?" But I just sensed that, okay, this is the moment we're supposed to do this. And just a little hack. I'm going to give you a church planting hack, okay?
I'm ready for this.
If you are growing your team and you're in a small space and you're about to go to 2 services, one of the things you do is you go to your core leaders and you talk to them and you ask them to make a sacrifice. And that sacrifice is, be willing to sit in the auditorium or sanctuary, whatever you want to call it, for both services. Because what you don't want to happen is a new family to show up and it's awkward and there's 12 people in the room or 10 people in the room or 20 people in the room, and there's 100 chairs out, and it's like, what's going on? And so our people were so receptive to that, but there is that factor of just people seeing other people in the room, which makes them feel, okay, this is a safe place for me. This is not some weird thing going on. And that's a key thing. So if you're trying to go to 2 services, even in an established church, when you take that step, sometimes you have to fill it, because you're going from one room that maybe seats whatever the number is, 200, 300, 500, and you're going to, in essence, double your capacity. Yeah. You're not typically going to immediately, fill that up. So you have to be strategic. And so that's just a little hack that we used at that point. And when we did that, we immediately saw more growth. And it was just amazing to see what God was doing. We, of course, had Sandra, our kids director, come on. Raya had been on with us for a while, who works in kids ministry as well. They're both incredible and serve with so much passion and integrity. And it's just such a team effort. So it's been really wild.
Yeah, I think that kind of stirs up a question in my mind, though, for the listeners and the viewers. If imagine they're at a church and they're thinking about going to a second service. I remember hearing, maybe it was a podcast or maybe I heard it in person when I was listening to Carey Nieuwhof one time. He was talking about...
Who's he? I'm just kidding. Like the biggest Christian podcast.
Carey Nieuwhof is incredible. He, I think I was at an Orange conference when he actually mentioned this on stage. He was saying when your church is roughly at 80% attendance capacity in your auditorium, you're practically ready to launch into a next service.
Sure.
And he said that's pretty much a goal or a success that you'll be ready to launch. What's some other pointers that you might have to say people are ready to launch into the next service?
Well, for us, one of the challenges we were running into was the people, and we could have put a few more chairs in that room, but the problem we were running into, if you remember, was our kids' space.
Yeah.
So there's other factors. It could be parking. It could be your kids' space that are going to force you to multiply quicker. But here's the beauty of it. If you're able to do it and you're strategic about it and you seed it with people willing to be in both services to fill the gap for a season, not forever, but just for a season, what that does is, this is just my opinion, when you have multiple services, it gives you the ability to reach more people.
Yeah.
Right? If, those services have to be at strategic times, right? Sunday morning across the board, no matter where you are in ministry, that's prime time for church.
Yeah.
So us being able to do that was going to also be the thing that helped us go to the next level. And I think the same is true for the people that are listening. There's other things that you can do, whether it's blocking off part of your sanctuary or auditorium. There's all kinds of creative things you can do. But the other thing is, depending on the model of church you're in, like for us, we have kids ministry simultaneously while we have worship services. And so we ask everybody, serve one, worship one.
Yeah.
And we really did a big campaign during that second trimester of doing that to prepare us, because once you get to that third trimester, and we can talk about that a little bit more, that's really like we're coming up on pre-launch. I mean, here we go. Like, fire the engines. We're about to rock. We're about to go. It's game time. And so you've got to make sure you've got the foundation laid. So the first trimester, semester, whatever you want to call it, is really about setting culture and building that initial core. The second is really about building the teams and laying that foundation. And really, you're always setting the culture, but hopefully by that point, some of that's going to be set. And so with the two services, that's, a big part of it for us, because we were out of space in our kids' rooms.
Yeah. I feel like for those of you who were a part of many Zoom calls over the COVID season, I had many days where my kids were climbing all over me. And that's what that room felt like to me. Like, thinking about it, the kids' space was so opened up, and then the bathrooms were in another section of the room, so they would have to leave the doors, and slam and open and close throughout the service, go to the bathroom. I just felt like I was sitting on a Zoom call and my kids were just climbing on me. That's exactly.
When you're preaching and people are like, amen, then you hear the toilet flush.
Yeah. That's one thing. Even then and now, I've never seen so many people get up during church to either grab coffee or go to the bathroom. It's funny to see, especially in an open layout room like we had at that space. It was like, somebody would stand up and amen and then go grab a cup of coffee and still be listening. It was just kind of a different environment than I was used to.
Yeah.
But I mean, first world problems, right? I mean, it was such a great opportunity to have that space, even while this one that we're currently in was being built.
Yeah, us just getting to that Sunday morning to continue to build our team. And like I said in a previous episode, the reason why I like that is it forces people that are new to the community to not just show up to your thing at a different time and then plug into a different church. You want people to be part of your church as you're building a team. So that's why I like Sunday morning so much. I'm just a huge fan of that. And I'm also a huge fan of really a 9 to 10 month, I'm on the ground, I'm getting ready to launch this church, because that pressure of setting, you don't have to set the exact date. I think originally our date was going to be October 10th, and then we moved it to the 24th because of some of the building stuff, and we were waiting on some gear. But that pressure all the way back in January, when I said, we're launching this church in October, it created a pressure on everybody, a sense of urgency where the baby's coming. Just like when you find out, the first trimester, you're like, oh yeah, she's pregnant, the baby's coming, but you're not really feeling a whole lot of heat. But when that second trimester comes, and you can begin to see the baby, and the pressure increases.
The Braxton Hicks of church planning. That's what it is. It's like false labor. Oh, we're about to do this? All right, here we go.
That's right.
Yeah, but I remember we created that second opportunity for people to not only sit in if they were serving, because there was very minimal serving opportunities at the time, because it was small. It was like a couple of greeters at the door, a few people watching the kids in the kids' room, maybe 2 to 4 max, and that was really about it. And, there was obviously some setup and some volunteer stuff, which was very minimal. But at the end of the day, it was a small thing. But we were making room for people not only to come to church, but also implant the idea in our volunteers' mind, our connectors' minds, that, hey, we've got to get ready for this big building that we're about to kind of go into. So it was just really unique, but cool to see our volunteers step up and be like, we're willing to stay another service to help create that energy, but we're also going to keep inviting. That's when I think we started inviting more.
Yes.
Like, that's when maybe we printed the first cards then. We just kind of put ourselves on the map. Like, we made a website, but we didn't really want to publicize it yet because we weren't ready for the growth.
Right.
And so we were like, what do we need to do in the short time that we have to be known in this area? And so we kind of started working on that, wrapping our minds around digital advertisement, website, printing some, cards and just having people share word of mouth.
Yeah, there's a really key thing in this, and it's there's this false idea, okay, that you can, if you've ever planted a church, you don't have this idea, but there's this false idea sometimes with people when they think about church planting, especially among established pastors, because I've also pastored an established church and I've been around plenty, that, you can just do some marketing and make it look cool, and these church plants are going to have people show up. A little bit, not really though, because what you had before we ever did a shred of marketing, anything, was we built a team.
Yeah.
We built a culture, we built a team, and through God's blessing and favor, we saw a lot of people get engaged with us and connected with us. And so before we ever sent out anything in marketing, we had well over 100 people. We were larger, and I don't say that in a boastful way, but we were larger than the average church in America. The average church size in America, and there's some debate around this, is about 75 people. If you take every mega church and the smallest church, meeting at somebody's house, and you mix them all up and you take the average, you're looking at somewhere between 75, maybe up to 100 people. And so before we ever did any marketing, we had the team because we wanted to make sure that we could minister and serve and reach the people in the community that God would bring us. And that's why this pre-launch that I've talked about, conception, first trimester, second trimester, and then, of course, we can dive some into the third, are so critical. I do think this, though, what I think we ought to do is in our next episode, we'll dive into the third trimester and talk about some of the strategies that we used for marketing. Right. What are the things that we did? How did we stand out? What are some of the things that we did to make ourselves known? Because in essence, you got to realize when we were in this temporary 4,000 square foot warehouse space, not only could you hear the toilet flush every time you were preaching and leading worship, and hear the kids playing during your sermon, nobody knew who we were.
Right.
We were intentionally almost not letting people know who we were. We were building very intentionally, but not broadcasting who we were because we didn't want to oversell something we couldn't deliver on. And so we were slowly laying that foundation. Now, to lay a foundation in a matter of, at this point in the story, 6 months in, you better be working real hard. It's a lot of hard work, but it's fun. When you're doing what you love, it's not really work.
Right.
It's such a joy. And when you're doing it and you're doing what God's told you to do and you're really trying to press into the Holy Spirit, He gives you that supernatural energy to be able to do what you need to do. So, that's
You reminded me of that old quote. You just aged yourself.
Oh, thanks.
What was the quote? It's if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life.
Oh,
I think that's I feel like you should just have that in your office now or something.
I'm gonna paint that on the wall.
Yeah. No, but I think we'll talk about the strategy and stuff more and the launching preparation in the next episode. But I just remember simultaneously like being in that building, but also working our tails off to make sure the building we're in now was ready.
Yes. I forgot about that part.
I mean, that's what we were doing probably 90% of our days.
It was getting the facility ready. So it was wild because literally it was just a open box, concrete walls that they had just put up. And then we committed to the building and jumped into it. And the construction team with McGarvey did a really, really nice job, and they were on it, especially with all the delays that you mentioned, the pandemic and all this stuff. And so not only did we plant a church, we also, oversaw the construction of a building. So it has been quite the ride. Yeah. But what's been so amazing about it is, just the energy and the strength that the Lord has given us through this. So we give all the glory to God, and it's just been amazing how He's given us the strength and multiplied our time, and it's just been crazy.
Yeah, I think if you're even thinking about church planning, like I know it can be overwhelming. Like the first trimester, thinking about that, like when my wife was pregnant with all of our kids, that was like the worst part for her because she was so nauseous. She was like worried. She was like, I don't, if am I ready for this?
That's when you most are.
And that's honestly what you feel like in the first trimester of church planning. You know, it's just like, oh my gosh, here we go. This is for real. I'm going to throw
scary.
up. I don't feel great. I'm hungry all the time. You know, that's the kind of state you live in.
I need to stress eat.
And then, you just keep going and you keep going, and God just keeps blessing. And that a lot of that money that was given, obviously, we stewarded with the new building, the new space we're building out, including the equipment we put in that we had Clear AVL, again, the company that is out of Houston, Texas, help us install. If you guys are looking for somebody, or maybe you're listening to this and you're like, hey, we need to upgrade, or we need to, install some stuff or build something, Clear AVL, Houston, Texas are your guys.
Yeah, and Brian Poole is amazing, overseeing the project.
Yeah, those guys are incredible. If you need any more info on those teams and those guys, we'll put that on this podcast. But would love to have you guys reach out to them if you're in need of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I just remember having a conversation with somebody on the phone not too long ago about them like scaling up their church. They're like, all right, we're ready to do some more stuff. We need to buy more equipment. And they sent me over their quote. They're like, oh man, this is what we're thinking. And it was nearly $1 million of an upgrade that they were doing. I'm not talking about building. I'm just talking about equipment, like AVL equipment. And I was like, dude, this is insane. I was like, my budget was a fraction of this. And so
we still did all this on a church plant budget. I mean, it wasn't like
it wasn't like we just went nuts and bought state-of-the-art stuff and built state-of-the-art.
We've had to be real innovative.
This room right here that we're sitting and recording was going to be another children's room, like another kids' space. And it's kind of extended from the kids' area, so it's more of a multi-purpose room. And I was like, let's turn this into like a content studio or something. So Eric and I talked about that, and we're like, we want to produce stuff here. For example, this podcast. And so I know you can't see it if you're listening to this, but we're sitting in that room now. And so it's just kind of cool to be on the other end of that. But just, man, that time where we were preparing to launch was so nerve wracking, because it's like, that was the very reason we pushed back, because the building wasn't ready. Like leading up to it, we'll talk about the strategy again, but we were praying, like we were ready. We even had a night of worship and prayer where we came in the building and wrote people we wanted to see come to know Christ and come to Hope City, or people that we wanted to pray for on the concrete floors of the building. Like, we were just hungry for what God was going to do. And I think we're just living on the other side of that fruit now. And it's just been cool to see. But anyway, we'll talk about that in the next episode. The launch, the strategy. It was just a lot. But I know right now we've been talking about just the build up, and that phase of the what would you call it? How'd you call it? Not the phase of conception, but what was your didn't you have a name for it? No, I don't know. Maybe I thought you had a name or a title for it. We were in basically stage 3 of this church planning.
Your trimester.
Trimester.
Yeah, I just use the term that they use.
You would think I would know these terms after having 5 kids. But
Come on,
honestly, after recording a few of these and just feeling tired after a long day, you get.
Well, yeah. The last thing, and I'll wrap this up, is with your church plant. If you establish a church plant, just some side notes, little pointers here that we did that I believe is really important is make sure you create the right set of accountability. We've been talking about generosity and all these amazing things. Like, I don't have access to any of this money. One of the things I did when I set the church up was I set up a team of people who help oversee that. I don't have access. I'm not on the bank account. I can't access any of the money. We have a team of accountability, and I also set up what's called I call it a pastoral advisory team. Mm-hmm. And so they keep me accountable. They're helping encourage me. They're helping me dream and pray about big things within the church. And so I feel like those are really key things. So if you're leading a church or thinking about planting a church, you don't want to be exposed like that. You want to make sure those accountability things are in place, because this is not your church. This is God's.
Right.
And so anyway, man, what a great episode. We can't wait for you to be back for the next episode. Thanks so much for joining us. Hope you're enjoying the conversation. We're sure excited to share with you all that God's doing. So we'll see you soon. Thanks.